Saturday morning, what,
Oh,
7 o'clock. Dave and I, early ones here. It was fun trying to back up in the dark with my trailer. But we're going to break these walls up. The first one here by the door is going to be number 1. We're going to cut it somewhere in the corner there. I haven't figured out what yet. And then probably right along here. This section will be number 2. And depending on how heavy that is, that's going to determine what we do on that other back wall. So then we got 3 and 4, riding it down along this, in between these 2 studs here. I still got to get rid of this cable that's going across there. We got these wells kind of supported so we can start with the front, and hopefully that'll stay up. Then we got 5, 6, and 7, unless we decide to do this in the 2, which would be right around here. And then 8, and 9 here. That one's not very good, is it? There we go. 8 and 9. So that should do it. We'll get started. We got the rest of the help coming. So we got an early start. I knew I had a crew coming for the morning, but limited time on some of the guys that were coming, so I was trying to really get an early start. And we just sawzalling down the first section of wall around the main door here. And the idea was to try to get this whole doorway in one wall. What I'd like to do is stand these up. Later when I'm going to put this together, I want to stand these walls up, join them together, add a stud with it where I join them together, and just kind of nail them up together. And probably patch in some of the cedar shingles and maybe some of the top pieces as well. Along the top, I tried to cut in some areas that would be the easiest to patch in or not be noticeable, but sometimes you just had to go where a stud was. So anyway, here we weren't sure how heavy these walls are going to be. They're really wide at the bottom, almost 8 inches, because they flared out the bottoms of these walls, and some of them were damaged as well too. We're going to need some repairs. So anyway, we're trying to be cautious about supporting things and catching it with the 2x4s as we lower it down. We had no power out here, so what we did was had all of our batteries charged up the night before. We pooled all of them together, and we were going through batteries pretty quickly because some of my batteries are old for my DeWalt Sawzall. So what we ended up doing as we were going, we would take 2 batteries up to Tom's garage, or 3 batteries actually, and charge them in between taking walls over to the barn, which helped us to keep going. I think we would have ran out pretty quickly if we hadn't done that. So this wall is starting to come down. We're getting a feel for it. It was pretty heavy, and this one was top heavy, which made it a little awkward. And you'll see we decided after this to cut smaller sections because it was kind of a lot to try to carry. We had the walls have tongue and groove over the studs, and the studs are full 2x4 studs with the wedges built on the bottom to make them almost 8 inches at the bottom. Plus you got the cedar shingles, plus you got on top you have that decorative 3/4 inch boards that are covering the top part of the sheeting. So it adds up, and things were a little wet as well because it's been rainy, so it was a little heavier than I was hoping they'd be, but I was able to get my trailer, my little trailer. I built like a little 2x4 support in the back so that I could just set these on top of it one at a time. Later we actually tried to get a couple of smaller walls, and then we kind of just tied up the gate. I had a couple of cables to tie that up, which didn't work so well, so we ended up having to use rope, but that worked pretty good to get those sections over to where we were going. So we got this, the next one was taken down now. And a little bit of So we're kind of learning as we go here. It seems like whenever you take on a project you've never done, there's kind of a learning curve, and by the end you start figuring some things out. Of course, I'll probably never do anything like this again, so I don't know how useful that will be. But yeah, at first we were kind of carrying things. Here's where we're back at the Elward barn where we're storing things, and what I'm doing here is we're actually leaning them up against the east side of the barn, and I'm going to cover them with plastic for now so they can sit here for a while till at such a time as we can put this back up here on this lot, which is going to be basically just to the right of the picture is where we're going to be putting this. I still have to talk to the historian and find out if he knows anything about this depot, and also talk to the town to find out how they're going to treat it. I'm kind of looking at it as more like a shed, because it won't be on a foundation. It'll just be kind of like a floating storage building, essentially. So I'm not anticipating any problems there, but we'll see. But anyway, I have the door already here leaned up first, and then I put these wall sections on over that. And I'm actually, in the end, I had to actually rope these down and put plastic over them, because the door that I had sitting there actually blew down in the wind. The wind was coming through the barn, actually tipped it over, so I didn't want this whole pile to go down. We were laughing there about the mouse stuff that was falling off onto us. There's two of my grandkids, Torin and Asher, came to help us out and bring us lunch. Okay, now we're on the west front wall section on the side. Pulling that down. We decided the end walls we broke into two. I actually split it right between the windows. We actually removed some of the nails that were holding the two studs together, and then sawzalled down the outside sheathing. So that actually worked out pretty good. We had to use a flat bar on a crowbar to kind of separate them a little bit to make it easier to sawzall. We got smarter here, and we started rolling it a little bit instead of carrying. That actually worked a little better. And later on, when I was dropping the walls off at the other barn, we actually able to back right up to it and just kind of tip it off. So again, you get a little smarter as you're doing these things. Once your back starts to hurt a little bit. And then here we decided, well, let's just roll the storage cart right underneath it and just tip it onto it. That worked a lot better as well. I actually didn't even tie these down. They were on there so secure. It was, and we were just going a couple miles down the road. That worked out really well. Unfortunately, I didn't get stopped because the trailer is not registered. I bought it a few months ago in the middle of the COVID and can't get into the DMV, and I decided just to kind of wait until we can get in there to get it registered. what was interesting about these walls is they weren't actually sitting on the deck. They actually, the wall studs actually went past the deck, and some of them were tied to the floor joist, but most of them weren't. They were actually just kind of floating or sitting on another a timber that was like below the floor joist. It was really kind of an odd setup. That's why some of them weren't very sturdy, and on one side there was a cable actually holding the wall together, which I had to end up cutting out because I couldn't get the bolts to turn. So my plan is to actually build a new deck for this. I'm going to keep these deck boards and the timbers. I'm not sure what I'll use them for, but I'm thinking of building actually a pressure treated base for this so that it'll last long, and setting everything on pressure treated, and then taking these walls and cutting off what would have went below the floor, and then adding a sill plate underneath them, and then just setting them on top of the wall. So I actually got the outside measurements, width and length of this, so I'll be building that, the deck to that, and then just setting these on, and hopefully I get that right. I know this was moved, the walls had moved around a little bit, but hopefully it'll work. It started to rain here a little bit. It was kind of raining off and on, which didn't help with the weight, but I was hoping for a few good sunny days to really dry things out. And the last two sections came down, and now we're down to the just the deck. And you see there's some good sized timbers underneath there.
Ryan, it's gone! Dad's asking if you want some junk.
What's that?
He's asking Ryan if you want some junk. No. We could bury it in your backyard for you to dig up later.
Alright, so the last two sections. Next
There
job,
he is.
You got the next hand there. You got the next job will be taking up the floor, which was rolled in here on log.
Yeah, the story behind this depot is it was in the front of his land, and it actually, he had a guy that actually rolled it on logs back to this spot. And I think part of it kind of came apart as it brought there. So here's the last of the walls leaned up and ready to go, and then a little later that night, Dave Catalino and I, we covered it up and we roped it down. So it should be good to go.